My name is Daniel Ashworth. I am 37 years old, and the greatest love of my life began with a lie I paid her to tell. I want you to stay with me for this one, because I promise you, by the time we reach the end of this story, you're going to feel something you didn't expect to feel today. And if stories like this are what brought you here, stories about love that sneaks up on you, love that finds you when you've stopped looking, love that refuses to let go even when everything says it should, then you are exactly where you belong. Welcome to Ivy's Secret Story. Hit that subscribe button right now. Thousands of people have already made this channel their secret place for stories that feel like home. Join them. You won't regret it. Now, let me tell you about the woman who changed my entire life, and how it almost ended before it ever really began. I was not supposed to hire anyone. My financial advisor, my sister, my accountant, all three of them told me the same thing when I called them that week. Daniel, you cannot afford another mistake. And they were right. 6 months earlier, I had lost my company. Not slowly, not gently, all at once, the way a building collapses, fine, then rubble. What had taken me 11 years to build, a mid-size event logistics company that employed 43 people at its peak, had been gutted by a partner I trusted with everything. Marcus Webb had been my best friend since university. He had the handshake I trusted. He had the smile that made investors feel comfortable. And for 11 years, while I worked 14-hour days building the actual infrastructure of our business, Marcus had been quietly redirecting client payments, inflating invoices, and siphoning money through a shell company I didn't know existed. By the time our accountant found it, Marcus was on a one-way flight to Lisbon. I was left with the lawsuits, the debt, the humiliation, and 43 people who no longer had jobs. I sold everything. The apartment in the city, the car, the vacation cabin I had never once actually vacationed in. I moved into a small rented house on the outskirts of Hale, a quiet town in the English countryside that I had only been to twice in my life, but where rent was something I could still afford. I was rebuilding from scratch. Consulting work, small contracts, slow. And then the letter arrived from Pemberton Capital. Pemberton Capital was the single largest private investment group in the north of England. Getting a contract from them wouldn't just stabilize my finances, it would restore everything. My reputation, my future, the chance to start again properly. The letter said I had been shortlisted. It also said that the final evaluation weekend would be held at the Pemberton estate, a private gathering of the top 4 consultants under consideration. A weekend of informal meetings, dinners, and assessments. The letter concluded with one line that made my stomach drop. Spouses and partners are warmly encouraged to attend. I sat at my kitchen table staring at that sentence for a long time. I had been divorced for 3 years. My ex-wife, Priya, had left the year before the company collapsed, not because of the collapse, but because of everything that had been quietly collapsing between us long before that. We had been polite about it. Grown up. No drama. She had moved to Edinburgh. We occasionally texted on birthdays. I wasn't bitter about Priya. I was just alone. And now I needed a partner for a weekend that could define the rest of my professional life. My sister Claudia was the one who said it first, as a joke. You could hire someone. I didn't laugh. I found the agency through a referral I am still too embarrassed to fully explain. It was a legitimate business, professional companions for corporate events, social functions, galas. Nothing inappropriate. The agency was meticulous about making that clear. I filled out a form describing the event. A country house weekend, formal dinners, outdoor activities, conversations with wealthy investors and their wives. I needed someone who could hold a conversation without flinching, who understood professional social environments, who could be warm without being performative. The agency sent me 3 profiles. I chose the one who had listed, "I am comfortable with long silences, and I don't perform happiness I don't feel," under the personal notes section. Her name was Nora Calloway. She arrived at my rented house on a Thursday evening with a single rolling suitcase and a calm expression that told me she had done this before and found it neither exciting nor frightening. She was 34. brown hair pulled back, dark eyes that moved around a room the way a careful reader moves across a page, quickly, but missing nothing. She wore a gray coat that had seen better days and carried herself with the particular kind of quietness that belongs to people who have learned not to take up too much space. I shook her hand at the door. She looked at me for a moment, then said simply, "You seem nervous. That's going to be a problem this weekend." I blinked. "Excuse me." She set her suitcase down inside the hall. "The people you're trying to impress spend their lives reading people. If you seem nervous, they'll ask themselves why. And the answer they'll land on is that you have something to hide." I stared at her. "You've been hired for one weekend," I said, not to critique my emotional presentation. She looked at me without any sign of being stung. "You're right. I'm sorry." Then she picked up her suitcase and waited for me to show her to her room. I stood in the hall for a moment after she walked past me. Something about her honesty had bothered me, because she was completely right. And before we go any further, if you're new to Ivy's Secret Story, I need you to press that subscribe button right now. Every single week, we bring you stories like this one. Slow burns, unexpected love, moments that make you catch your breath. The community that has grown around this channel is something special. Don't miss another story. Subscribe. It takes 2 seconds, and it means everything. Now, back to Nora. We drove to the Pemberton estate the following morning. 2 hours, mostly quiet. I had given her a document, 2 pages of background. How we met at a charity gala 3 years ago. How long we had been together, 18 months. What she did for work. I had listed her as a freelance art consultant, which she had immediately approved with a small nod. She read it once, folded it, put it in her bag, never looked at it again. 20 minutes from the estate, she spoke. "What happened to your last company?" I kept my eyes on the road. "That's not in the document." "No, but someone this weekend is going to ask. And the way you answer will tell them more than the answer itself." I was quiet for a moment. Then I told her. All of it. Marcus, the fraud, the 43 people, the sale of everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Say exactly that. Don't smooth it over. Don't skip the part about the 43 people. The investors you're meeting built their wealth by trusting people who had been through fire. They don't want someone who has never failed. They want someone who knows what it costs." I glanced at her. "You're very good at this," I said quietly. She looked out the window. I've sat across from enough powerful people to know what they're listening for. I wanted to ask her more, but we had arrived. The Pemberton estate was everything you would expect from old English money. Stone walls, manicured grounds, a main house that had been standing for 200 years and knew it. Geoffrey Pemberton himself met us in the entrance hall. 70 years old, sharp eyes behind reading glasses. The kind of man who shook hands like he was assessing your spine. He looked at Nora. Then he smiled, not a polite smile, a genuine one. And he said, "You have your mother's eyes, Miss Calloway. I met your mother once, 20 years ago. Remarkable woman." Nora went completely still beside me. Something passed across her face so quickly I almost missed it. Then it was gone. "Thank you," she said. She was. Geoffrey nodded once, the nod of a man who understood grief without needing it explained, and led us inside. Later, in our room, while Nora was unpacking, I asked quietly, "Your mother, is she?" "She died 4 years ago," Nora said. "Lung cancer. It was fast." She continued, unpacking. "I'm sorry," I said. "So am I." There was a pause. I didn't know Geoffrey knew her. Neither did I. She folded a dress carefully over the back of a chair. I noticed her hands were not quite steady. I did not say anything else, but I didn't leave either. I sat in the armchair by the window and looked out at the grounds until she had finished unpacking and her hands had steadied again. She didn't ask me to leave. I think she was grateful I stayed. The first dinner was impeccable. Nora was extraordinary. She spoke with ease, asked questions that made people feel brilliant for answering them. And when one of the investors' wives asked her how she and I had met, she told the charity gala story with such specific, warm detail. The yellow dress she had been wearing, the fact that I had been at the wrong table and too stubborn to admit it, that I had to remind myself she had invented all of it. She laughed at the right moments. She touched my arm once, briefly, when I was talking about rebuilding. A single, light touch that told the entire room I believe in him. I felt it for the rest of the evening. That night, after dinner, we sat in the small sitting room attached to her suite. Nora had taken off her heels and was sitting with her legs tucked beneath her, holding a cup of tea. I said, "The yellow dress detail. Where did that come from?" She looked at the cup. My mother was wearing a yellow dress the night she met my father. He was at the wrong table at a fundraising dinner. Too stubborn to admit it. I was very still. "Nora, it's fine. That's not a detail you should have given away to a room full of strangers." She looked up at me. Something in her expression was different from anything I had seen in the last 24 hours. Unguarded. Raw. Sometimes the truest things are the ones you've been carrying so long they don't feel dangerous anymore. I held her gaze. "What do you carry?" she asked quietly. "Not the company. Not Marcus. The thing before all of that. I should have deflected. That's what the professional distance required. Instead, I said, the feeling that I was never actually someone people stayed for. That I was something people appreciated, capable, useful, dependable, but not someone anyone chose to love specifically." The room was very quiet. Nora looked at me for a long time. Then she said, voice barely above a whisper, "I know exactly what that feels like." We did not say anything else that night, but something between us had shifted quietly, irrevocably, the way ground shifts before anyone feels the earthquake. I have to stop right here, because I know some of you felt that just now. That line, "I was never someone people stayed for." This is what Ivy's Secret Story does every single week. We find the lines that live inside people and we make them heard. If this story is already sitting in your chest, subscribe right now. Tell one person about this channel, because stories like this one deserve to be shared. We are building something here, and you're a part of it. Subscribe, share, and stay with me, because what happens next is going to change everything. On the second afternoon, Jeffrey Pemberton asked me to walk with him through the grounds. This was the real assessment. I knew it. He knew I knew it. We walked for 20 minutes. He asked sharp questions. I answered honestly, the way Nora had told me to. I told him about the 43 people. I told him what it had cost. I told him what I had learned. Then he stopped walking. He looked out over his grounds and said, "I knew about Marcus Webb before you arrived." I stopped breathing. An associate of mine invested with his new firm in Lisbon. Lost a significant amount. Webb's methodology is consistent. He finds someone competent and rides their reputation until he's extracted everything of value. He turned to look at me. "I didn't invite you here to assess whether you're capable, Mr. Ashworth. I already know you're capable. I invited you here because I wanted to meet the man who built something worth stealing." I didn't speak for a moment. "And the partner requirement?" I asked carefully. Jeffrey smiled. "I find that the people who matter most to us reveal who we are far more honestly than any presentation. I have watched you with Miss Calloway." He began walking again. "She is not performing for you, and neither are you for her. That is rarer than you might think." My heart was hammering, because I had just realized something I should have seen coming and hadn't. I had not been performing for Nora. Not since the first night. Not since the yellow dress. Not since she sat across from me in that armchair and saw the thing I had never said out loud to anyone. I had not been pretending. That evening, before the final dinner, I found Nora at the window of our suite. She was looking out at the estate grounds. The last light was catching the stone walls, turning them amber. "Jeffrey knows," I said. She turned. "Knows what?" "That I hired you." She went still. "Are you sure?" "He told me he watched us." He said we weren't performing for each other. She looked at me for a long moment. Were we? I crossed the room. Nora, I need to tell you something before we walk into that dinner. And I need to tell you as myself, not as whoever we've both been performing for this weekend. Her eyes were careful, watching. Something happened to me in the last 2 days, I said. Something I did not account for and did not expect. And I don't know what to do with it yet. But I know that when this weekend ends and you get in a car and drive away, the thing I'm going to feel is not relief that the arrangement is complete. It's going to be loss. Nora did not move. Daniel, I know what the contract says. I know this is your work. I'm not asking you for anything. I needed you to know, because you've spent 2 days teaching me to say the true thing in the room where it matters. She was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, my mother used to say that the bravest thing a person can do is want something and admit it out loud. She stepped closer. I've been doing this work for 3 years, she said. I have sat across from dozens of people in rooms like this. I have smiled at their jokes and memorized their files and gone home without thinking about any of them twice. She paused. I have been thinking about you since the first night. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Nora, I don't know what this is either, she said, but I know I don't want to get in that car and drive away and pretend it was only a contract. I looked at her. Outside, the estate grounds had gone blue and silver in the fading light. Somewhere below us, dinner was being prepared. I reached out and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. Something so small, something that felt enormous. Then don't, I said. We went to dinner. Jeffrey Pemberton looked at us both when we entered the room. He smiled, that same genuine, unhurried smile from the first day. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The next morning, we drove home. An hour into the drive, Nora's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Her face changed. She answered briefly, said 3 words I couldn't hear, and hung up. What's wrong? I asked. She looked out the window. The agency. I waited. They've been contacted by Jeffrey Pemberton's assistant. He wants to send a formal letter of intent for the consulting contract. I exhaled slowly. That's good. The assistant also mentioned, she said carefully, that Mr. Pemberton asked that the arrangement with my agency not be disclosed in any formal capacity. He said, and I quote, some stories deserve to be allowed to become true. The car was very quiet. I kept my eyes on the road. Jeffrey Pemberton, I said finally, is a remarkably perceptive man. Nora made a sound that was almost a laugh. He also, she said, put my mother's painting in the hall of his east wing. I recognized it when we were walking through. He didn't mention it. He just let me see it. I glanced at her. He knew your mother. Better than I knew, she said softly. I think she was important to him once. A long time ago. She was quiet for a moment. He invited me here too, she said. Not just you. I thought about that. Some stories deserve to be allowed to become true. I reached across the seat and rested my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. 3 months later, Nora Calloway moved her single rolling suitcase into the rented house in Hale. Not because I asked her to, because she decided. There was no dramatic declaration, no grand gesture. One morning she showed up with her suitcase, stood in the hallway, and said, I've given the agency notice. I'm going to start a proper consultancy. I'll need a home office. I looked at her. There's a spare room upstairs. I know. She picked up her suitcase and headed for the stairs. I stood in the hallway watching her go, and I felt something I had not felt in so long. I had almost forgotten the shape of it. Safe. Chosen. Stayed for. 6 months after that, I received the first major contract from Pemberton Capital. It was significant enough to allow me to rehire 11 of the 43 people I had lost. Nora sat across from me at the kitchen table the night the letter arrived. She had made tea. There were wildflowers on the table. She had developed a habit of putting them in a jam jar by the window. Small, stubborn wildflowers from the field behind the house. I read her the letter out loud. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your instincts about people are good, Daniel. Better than you give yourself credit for. You trusted Marcus because he reminded you of the version of yourself you wanted to be, ambitious and easy in rooms. But what you actually are is honest, and rare, and worth trusting." I set the letter down. "You say things like that," I said, "as if they cost you nothing." She looked at me across the table. "They cost me everything," she said, "which is exactly why I say them." I stood up, walked around the table. I sat in the chair beside her and took both her hands in mine. "I did not hire you to fall in love with you," I said. She smiled, a real smile, the one that took over her whole face when she stopped trying to manage it. "I know, and you did not take a contract to fall in love with me." "No. So what do we call this?" She looked at our hands. "I think," she said slowly, "we call it the story that was true before either of us was brave enough to say so." Outside, the field behind the house was golden in the late afternoon. I leaned in and kissed her, not briefly, not carefully. The way you kiss someone when you're finally, completely sure. When we broke apart, she rested her head against my shoulder. "Your mother's wildflowers," I said quietly, nodding to the jam jar on the table. She looked at them. "She always said wildflowers belong in homes that are loved, not just lived in." I pulled her closer. Then they found the right house. And that is where their story began to become everything. Not with a perfect plan, not with the right timing, not with clean hands and clear skies and zero risk. With honesty, with showing up, with saying the true thing in the room where it mattered. If this story touched something inside you, if you felt it somewhere you weren't expecting, then you already know why this channel exists. Ivy's Secret Story is where stories like this one live. Stories about love that doesn't announce itself. Love that shows up quietly in a rented house with a single suitcase and wildflowers in a jam jar. If you're not yet subscribed to Ivy's Secret Story, do it right now. Right now, before you scroll away. Because every week, we are here. Every week, a new story. Every week, something that makes you feel less alone in the world. Hit subscribe. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. And if this one meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell us which moment hit you the hardest. We read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to hear that love still finds people. Even the ones who have stopped looking. Especially those ones. This has been Ivy's Secret Story. We'll see you in the next one.